Hey everyone, last weekend we had a catch up with our neighbours. We all went to one neighbour's house and everybody had to bring a dish, so you either had to take a salad or a dessert. And I decided to take the Easy Vegans sticky toffee pudding. It was a huge hit. Everybody loved it. It was so tasty. And the only problem that you'll have with making it, I think, is trying to stop yourself from eating it all in one hit if you're anything like me, because it is so tasty. So here I am just chopping up the dates, and I doubled my recipe just to make sure that there'd be enough to go around. So this is 400 grams of dates, and they're quite sticky to chop up. I was thinking to myself, maybe if you put a bit of oil on the knife, it might make it a bit easier to chop them up. They might not stick as much, but I just did the best I could chopping them and then went over them again just to see if I could get them any finer or into smaller pieces, but it's a bit difficult, so just did the best I could. And then into the saucepan, I put 400 mils of soy milk. And then you just add the dates into the milk. And once that's done, you move over to the heat. And you simmer it for about 3 to 5 minutes. And as you're stirring, you sort of chop the dates at the same time with the wooden spoon or the spoon that you use, so that you can get them into smaller pieces. And you'll see that the mixture gets thicker as you go. So while that's cooling, in a separate bowl, I used raw sugar. The Easy Vegan uses light, soft brown sugar, but I just had the raw sugar, and making sure it's vegan because some sugars use bone char to process it. So I'm pretty sure if it's organic that it's always vegan, but just double check. This packet actually says vegan on it, so that makes it easy for me. So I'm measuring out 200 grams of the sugar. And then put that in the bowl. And next I add in the butter. This is my favourite butter. I'm adding 200 grams of non-dairy butter here, which was almost the whole container of butter, because the butter is only 225 grams. So I pretty much used the whole tub of butter in this part. So then once you put the butter in, I just get my spoon and mix through the butter and the sugar to sort of cream it together a bit, and make sure that it's all mixed and incorporated. Just using the back of the spoon and squashing the butter into the sugar. You can see the butter becomes a lot softer as I'm stirring it, which makes it easier to work with. And then just mixing all the sugar through. Comes together quite nicely. You can see now that it's quite creamy and soft. Just scrape the excess off the spoon. Don't want to waste any of that goodness. And then you get your date and milk mixture that's been cooling while you've been doing this, and add it into this bowl. It is still quite warm, so as you're putting it in, it melts the butter. So then you just stir the date mixture into the butter and sugar. And you'll see at first, you can see some chunks of butter in there still, but then as I stir, because the mixture's hot, the butter melts down and incorporates into the date mixture. So once I felt satisfied that I'd done a good job stirring it and making sure there was no big chunks of butter or anything in there, get my trusty scales back again, and it's time to measure out the flour. So here I would be measuring out 400 grams of flour. The Easy Vegan uses self-raising flour, but I never have self-raising flour in my cupboard. I always just use plain organic flour. So that's what I use for this recipe as well. So my cup wasn't quite big enough to measure all the flour at once, so I had to do it in two separate. So then once you have all your flour in, you just have to stir it through and incorporate it and make sure that the flour's mixed into the date mixture. So as you can see, it's a very easy recipe. Oh, I also added some, bicarb soda, sorry. So I used 2 teaspoons. And the Easy Vegan also adds walnuts, but I didn't have any walnuts, so I skipped that step as well. The walnuts would have been really nice in it. I have made a sticky date pudding before with walnuts in it, but like I said, I didn't have any this time, so I just skipped that step and it was still amazing. So just incorporating all the flour in, making sure there's no lumps. Sifting the flour in probably would have been a good idea as well, but as you saw, I didn't do that. And it still worked out well, but I do usually like to sift my flour. And make sure you've got your oven preheated as well. I had my oven preheated to 180 degrees. And if you were more organised, you could probably have the container that you're going to cook in pre-greased. But I wasn't that organised, so you'll see in a minute that I am greasing my glass cookware. Just making sure, again, you're scraping all that goodness off the spoon because you don't want to miss any, especially with all that butter in there. So then you either grab your pre-greased pan, or I'm using this glass container because it also comes with a lid, so once it's cooled down you just click the lid on and don't need to use any cling film or any unnecessary plastic. So I'm just greasing this with a little bit of butter. And then once I make sure I've got all the corners and the sides covered, just adding in the mixture, which smells amazing. So as I said, I doubled this recipe, so you can see here that it looks like quite a lot of mixture. So the Easy Vegan recipe is 100 grams of non-dairy butter, 100 grams of light soft brown sugar, 200 grams of pitted dates, 200 mils of non-dairy milk, 1 teaspoon of vanilla essence, 200 grams of self-raising flour, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and 100 grams of walnuts. And then you also make a sauce to go with it, which is, again, really easy. So I'm just making sure that I've got it smooth and into every corner so that when it bakes evenly, making sure that there's not any big lumps in it or anything where it would cook unevenly. And because I doubled my recipe, I had to cook it for a bit longer. The Easy Vegan bakes theirs for around 30 minutes. I had to end up baking mine for about 45 minutes. And I just inserted a skewer, and then once it came out dry, I knew it was ready. So while that was in the oven, I got into making the amazing sauce that goes with it. So here I am with some more butter. I doubled the sauce recipe as well. So the Easy Vegan uses 100 grams of non-dairy butter, 200 grams of light soft brown sugar, 50 mils of non-dairy milk, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla essence. But because I'm doubling, I had 200 grams of non-dairy butter, so it does look like a lot of butter here, as you can see. Excuse my fingers. Then just resetting my scales to add in the sugar, which was 400 grams of sugar, which is quite a lot, but all of the sauce didn't get used. I took it as an extra in a little jug just in case people wanted to add extra sauce to their sticky date. And I ended up bringing home, there was probably about a quarter of the sticky date left and quite a lot of the sauce left in the jug. So I probably could have not doubled the sauce recipe and it would have worked just as well, but I thought I would give people the option to have extra sauce if they wanted. There was so many other desserts there that people took, so it was good that it worked out that way because I got to bring a sticky date home for us. So here I am adding the soy milk, which would have been 100 mils or 100 grams. And then once I did that, I just moved it over to the stove. And just stirring the butter and the sugar and the milk together to incorporate it. And then once it's all stirred in and it's come to a simmer, you just leave it on a low heat for about 5 minutes just to simmer away without stirring it, which is difficult for me because I feel like I have to stir things. But once you leave it to simmer for a bit, it thickens up and it gets a nice colour to it as well. So it was taking a while to get the heat into the saucepan. As you can see, the butter's taking a while to melt down, so I just kept stirring it until I got it to the point where I could just leave it to simmer. And by now the sticky date was starting to, the smell was starting to fill the kitchen as it was cooking in the oven. And I didn't think that it was actually going to make it to the neighbour's house because I thought we were all going to eat it before we got to take it across there because it smelt so good. So I just left that for a bit to get the heat into it. If you haven't checked out the Easy Vegans website, I would highly recommend it. There's some amazing recipes on here, including this one. And trust me, once you see the recipes on here, you'll feel like you just want to make everything at once. There's a Thai green tofu curry on here that I cannot wait to make. It's on my list of things. And there's also on here vegan Snickers, which is on my list of things as well, but I think I'm going to have to start walking more if I make some things off this website, because I know from making this sticky toffee pudding that the food tastes amazing, so no doubt I'll eat it all. There's also something on here, the rosemary and thyme herb crusted Christmas roast with homemade gravy. I'm thinking I'm not going to wait until Christmas to make that because it sounds, and the pictures on here look amazing. There's some nice quick recipes as well, like vegan puff pastry bakes, and there's only like 10-minute prep with that. So if you're ever in a hurry, there's some great recipes on here as well to get done. And the pictures are absolutely mouth-watering. So yeah, if you haven't been to the Easy Vegans website, I highly recommend it. So after I left it for a little bit on the stove, I just gave it another stir to try and get that butter melted through. If you didn't double the recipe like I did here, it probably would have, been melted through already. So you can see the heat's finally getting into the saucepan now because the butter's actually melting as I'm stirring it. So once I gave that another good stir is when I left it for, I think I ended up leaving mine for 5 minutes, just on a really low heat, and I just let it simmer away until it became a little bit thicker and it had a nice colour to it. And while it was simmering away, I stuck the skewer into my sticky date and it was ready to come out. So then I just used that same skewer to poke holes all over the top of the sticky toffee pudding and poured the sauce all over the top here, as you can see, which gives it an awesome sheen. And then I let it cool for about 30 minutes, and then we went across to the neighbour's house. So I would highly recommend giving this a go if you can, and enjoy.